We have this great fallacy in human nature to think that there are jobs that are more or less important. It's a part of delusion, but in the world it's at least understandable. On the spiritual path, these kinds of distinctions should not exist. We are servants of God. I remember when I first came to Master, how I used to want to sit at the back of the group, whatever group he was talking to, and to feel sort of unobserved, because in that kind of position, it was a lot easier for me to simply close my eyes and communicate with him, commune with him mentally. And it was disconcerting to me that it was always me that he singled out to talk to. And I used to feel that I must have terrible karma, that all these other people can sit there and communicate with him spiritually, but I'm the one he has to talk to outwardly. The fact is that on the spiritual path, the less the responsibility, the lower the position, really the easier it is to practice God's presence. I remember when I was in India, the time that I visited Sri Rama Yogi. And he had had some letters, some correspondence with Dayamata. And he asked me what was her position in the work. And I said that she was the president. And he asked me, well, what did that entail? And I told him she was the head of the whole institution in all the different countries, and I said something about her different responsibilities. And he said, oof, what a burden. And I said, sir, in that case, are you saying that it's bad karma to be president? Is the criterion for being the head of a spiritual institution your spiritual unfitness? And he smiled. He said, of course, I don't mean it like that. It's a blessing for her, since she has this karma to work out, that she's in a position where she can work it out more quickly. But that doesn't mean that it would be a blessing for most people to be in that position. It would be a misfortune if it was not their karma. The fact is that where our karma puts us, where our karma attracts us, that's where we really belong. But it is a burden to have the karma of responsibility, to have the karma of leadership, to have the karma of having to carry more thoughts about what's to be done and so on. I would not call it bad karma, but I would call it, spiritually speaking, you will find that devotees prefer to be in a position where they can keep their minds more on God. And if this is a duty that they have to fulfill, then they see it in that way. It's only worldly people who see positions of leadership as a fulfillment. To spiritual people, it's a burden. Perhaps it's a good burden. But it is a burden because it's a responsibility, it's a service. A leader is a servant. He is not a dictator if he is a leader in the right spirit. He doesn't throw his weight around. He understands the great sacrifice that he must make all the time. A position of leadership is a position of the official punching bag. And it must be understood that way if a person is ever to have any kind of peace of mind on the spiritual path. Otherwise, there come in all those attitudes that the world breeds in us, but that have nothing to do with spiritual progress. Jealousy, ambition, desire for this thing and that thing, not liking this job, not liking that job. I remember when I was working at Master's Desert Retreat, and we were digging a swimming pool. It was not something that he needed, it was just something that he used as an excuse to keep us there with him, because he didn't want us just sunbathing when he was dictating his Gita interpretations. So he had this makeshift job for us. The pool was never used. In fact, it couldn't be used because there was nowhere for the water to go when you wanted to drain it. It was very badly made. But anyway, we were digging this hole in the hot Southern California desert sunshine. And it gets very hot. At that time then, I think it was around 110 in the shade. And Master came out and shoveled with us for a while. And I noticed him panting just slightly. And so I said, it's hot work, isn't it? Not meaning to complain at all, but he looked at me very sternly. He said, it is good work. And this was the spirit that he trained us in. And I've learned from him not to think in terms of where people are, what jobs they do, what position they hold. This isn't what matters. The energy flow is what matters, where the spirit is right. And where that spirit is right, where there's a spirit of not thinking of what I want or what's nice for me or how important am I or all these things, but where there is the feeling of just how can I serve? And the devotee wants the lowest job because to him that is the highest job. Not that he sees it in that way particularly, because he sees all things as one. But it becomes the highest job by virtue of the joy he feels in knowing that it doesn't matter. In knowing that he can do anything and still feel like a king. Knowing that he can do anything and still feel joy. That's why doing the lowest jobs gives more joy. Because it helps to reinforce, to reaffirm that all-important understanding, insight on the spiritual path. When you are in a state of inward attunement, then these attitudes come automatically. And as soon as that attunement slips a little bit, suddenly you start thinking, hey, what about me? And all those worldly thoughts come in all over again. And you start thinking, I should have this position, I should have that kind of position, and so on. But you could be a street sweeper, somebody who has the lowest job in society, taking away human excrement in India and just dirty jobs. And you could be full of God's consciousness and you would be a king. And you could be a king and you would be nothing but a street sweeper in the deeper sense. In God's eyes you would be nothing. Because to God there isn't anything, anything important or unimportant. God is omnipresent. God is in the smallest speck of dust. And there is no star, no galaxy that is more important than you as a human being because you are a creature of God. There is nothing in this universe that is more important than you. And by the same token, there is nothing in this universe less important than you, depending on how you look at it. If you look at yourself as just a human being with certain things I'm doing and these things are important and so on, then you're unimportant. But if you realize that your importance is the fact that you are a child of God. One time there was an Indian who came to Mount Washington and he had an appointment with Master. And Sister Gyanamata received him. And this Indian was very supercilious. He was thinking, well, I'm going to see an Indian guru, and I too am an Indian. Who are these Americans here like this? And he was very, very arrogant. And afterwards, he came out feeling blissful, and apparently his consciousness had been changed being with Master. And he saw Sister, and he came up to her, and he said, please excuse me for treating you the way I did. In India, we are taught to respect women, and particularly mothers. And Sister's answer was beautiful. She said, I don't consider it important to be a woman or a mother. Half the people in the human race are women, and most of them are mothers. But the fact that I have become a sister and a devotee of God in this life, you may respect that if you like. That was a beautiful answer. There was no ego there. It was just saying that if I have any importance, it's because I'm a part of God. And in a worldly way, whether I'm your servant, whether I'm your mother, whether I'm this or that, didn't matter to her at all. One person whom she had helped for many years one time thanked her for all she had done for him. Her only answer was, it's the nature of a fig tree to bear figs. That's sweet. It's just our nature to do what we have to do. We have been certain people in the past, and it's natural for us to do certain things. I can do certain things well. Other things I would have to work at very hard. And so this karma has to expiate itself in a way. Induji gave a beautiful account of something. He had been asking many different saints, what is the purpose of life? And he got these long-winded explanations, or he got scoldings that this is too deep a question for you and you're not ready for this answer, and so on. And finally he came to this Swami Narayan, whom I've described in my book, Letters from India, a very remarkable man in many ways, and a great saint. And he asked him the same question, and Narayan Swami's answer was beautiful. He said, to cancel your accounts and don't open any new ones. Very, very good. That's really what it's all about. All our motive should be freedom, not involvement. Anything that we do, it should be to cancel accounts. To say, all right, I've got this to do, I owe this debt, I have this thing to finish. That's finished. Leave it. In this way, the real guideline of all moral law should be freedom. Freedom from further involvement. It doesn't mean that you become absolutely, by uninvolved, that you become unsympathetic, uncompassionate, and so on. But then when you work from a level of freedom, you can give with absolute freedom. When there is an account to settle, there is a sense of I and you. There is a sense of, I hope you like what I'm doing, or different things like this. Keep that thought out of your mind. Just understand you have certain duties that you have undertaken in your life, in this life and in other lives. And these things will come to you whether you like them or not. Arjuna didn't want to fight. And Sri Krishna said to him that even if you say you won't fight, your own nature will force you to fight. Even if you decide you're not going to do certain things, you will have to, because that is your own nature. That's who and what you are on a personality level. So let us have this understanding that we are all servants of God, whatever our position, whatever our place, whatever our authority or lack of it. We're all His servants, and in that we are all equally important. You know, in Mount Washington, certain people were very, very close to Master or had certain positions of authority, and he had to give those positions to people who had that talent, people who had that karma, whatever. But you know, there were certain people, maybe a cook in the kitchen, who nobody knew. As far as outward position is concerned, they'd all be looking at Dayama and this one and that one, and I'm not saying she's less for this, but they wouldn't be noticing that person, and yet anybody of perception, it might be that one he'd go to. Because to be the boss doesn't make you more spiritual necessarily. To be the head of an institution doesn't make you necessarily greater. And sometimes it's the lowest one that is the real spiritual force in a community. Make yourself like that. Don't think where you are in an outward way, but where you are inwardly with God. You could be doing nothing but just sweeping walks. And yet, if you are close to God, you could be one of the greatest inspirations. And anything that you do as a servant of God, anything that you do with love for people, it will bring God to you. And what more can you do that's worthwhile? And more than that, it will give joy to people. You don't know why you like to be with certain people, but still it's a vibration that they put out, a vibration of humility, a vibration of sweetness, a vibration of service. And you can do more in the way of serving people just by thinking nicely than by serving efficiently. It's always the bhav, the consciousness, the attitude with which you do a thing that makes it really right. And when it's done efficiently, perfectly, absolutely, just ABC, well organized, well structured, well formed, everything is just right, somehow there's no pleasure in it. Somehow people get nothing from it. And it turns even, as I said, sour. So we need to understand whether we live in a spiritual community or whether we live in a worldly environment. I know I met somebody in Calcutta when I was there this last time. And he said that he went to some government office. He had to have some little official thing done, and he was sent to deal with some sort of fourth-rank clerk, a very, very low position as far as any outward thing in the echelon of that institutional office was concerned. And he was just conducting his regular business. And then he noticed that this man was just like a king in this position. His eyes were so calm and so inward. And his smile was so... there was a certain quality to it that transmitted it to this man who was on the path and therefore was sensitive to these things. And he, after the official business had been conducted, he said, who is your guru? And the man smiled inwardly. He said, well, I'll take you to him. And he took him there. And this man himself, when he got on the train to go back to his home from the office, his breath would stop. And when the train reached the station, his breath would start again, and he'd get off calmly and go to work. He was a great saint. And he just had this job, and he was happy that it was an insignificant job because it made it easier for him to just think about God all the time. And he'd do this little nonsense and sign his signature and then sit there and do a couple of kriyas. What more do you want? The sign of your spiritual development is how joyous you can be in having nothing, in not being looked to for anything, in not having any kind of authority, but in knowing in your heart that you are God's servant. What more can there be than that? You know the story of that woman devotee, I think her name was Sabari. She was in the forest with many great rishis. They were all doing great yogic pranayams and practices and so on, and she didn't know any of these things. And so, but the rumor was that Rama would come that way someday, that he was on his way. And so all her sadhana was just thinking, well, he might come today, and she would sweep the forest walk so that there was no thorn, no twig for him to step on. And all she did was just sweep those forest walks for Rama and also for these great yogis. Finally, Rama came. And all these great yogis were expecting, well, he'll come to my hut, he'll come to my hut. But no, he went to her hut. Because she was the greatest devotee of all. When you can sweep your path clean, when you can spend all your time and energy working to sweep that path clean, and not thinking about these outward things, knowing that the show has to go on. As long as you've got a world, there have to be positions, there have to be jobs, there have to be certain people with talents for one thing or for another thing, and it's a blessing for them to be able to work out their karma. But there's no place for envy. There's no place for jealousy. There's no place for pride of position. There's no place for ambition. He who seeks honor in God's work receives dishonor. Seek rather to be honored by God in your own heart, by His presence and His love and His sweetness there. There's nothing else that matters, nothing else. The meaning of happiness. This is the title of our subject. The Bhagavad Gita, a great scripture of India, probably the best known scripture of India, says that to the peaceless person, how is happiness possible? It speaks of happiness as being the fruit of an inner harmony, an inner peace. And the restless mind, it says, is incapable of knowing what true happiness is. This is in direct contrast to our Western concept of becoming happy by going out and having a good time, becoming happy by turning the radio a little bit louder, having a little faster beat to our jazz, having a little more excitement to whatever it is that we are doing. The happiness of too much joking, the happiness of too much restlessness and excitement is really a drug on the spirit. It is not a true sense of joy at all. People in this state of consciousness are not really aware of being happy All they are aware of is a certain state of intoxication where they are for the moment unaware of their limitations, their ego, their jealousy, the various inner screws upon their minds and personalities that warp them and make them lonely, that make them unhappy. Being unaware of these things, they think that they are momentarily in a beautiful state of consciousness. They are not. It is merely covering up what is always there with confusion. The way out of suffering, the way out of loneliness, the way out of ignorance is not by drugging the mind or the senses, but by clarifying one's perceptions. And this takes place only in calmness. To every man in this world, happiness, whether rightly understood or wrongly understood, is his value, the thing that he wants. No matter what his particular goal is, happiness is the actual end of all his striving. The thought that if you are going to, if you want happiness, you have to give up the things that cause you unhappiness is based on the delusion that things can give you happiness or that things can give you unhappiness, that money can make you happy or that lack of money can make you unhappy. The fact of the matter is that it all depends upon the conditions of your own mind. Paramahansa Yogananda put it beautifully when he said, remember that conditions are always neutral. They are pleasurable or unpleasurable depending on how they satisfy certain conditions of the mind. Again, he said another beautiful statement. He said, remember this, there are no such things as obstacles. There are only opportunities. The obstacles that some people grieve over become the great opportunities of other people. Those people who have been sometimes the most handicapped, blind, deaf, dumb, even people who have had periods of insanity, crippled, all sorts of things that have been wrong with them. Many of these people have risen to to heights of greatness because they did not allow the obstacle to be an obstacle, to remain an obstacle. They made of it an opportunity. Similarly with happiness and unhappiness, it is not a question of the things that you have or don't have, but it is a question of how you react to them. In fact, if we are to understand the subject in its deepest essence, the nature of happiness is really to be understood only in terms of that which is its origin. Why do we respond to things that are... why do we seek happiness in the first place? Why do we shun those things that make us unhappy? Basically speaking, because happiness is our nature. Happiness is our normal state, and anything that takes us out of that happiness takes us into inharmony because it takes us away from that normal state. The fact is that all of us ultimately are souls. We are all little rays of the infinite joy. The beautiful definition that the great teacher of ancient India, Swami Shankaracharya, gave of God was Satchidanandam, which we might translate loosely as ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss. Bliss is our nature, and we seek this bliss because we seek ourselves. We seek that which we are. We seek that which we inwardly know is our true state of being. And there is no man in this world who does not seek, in one way or another, to be happy, to increase the happiness that he already has, and to uproot all those things within him or outside of him that may rob him of this happiness. The meaning of happiness, then, is to be defined entirely in terms of this experience, but the meaning of life itself may be defined also in terms of this experience. Why should we live rightly in this world? Why should we be kind to people? Why should we be harmonious? Why should we be loving, understanding, sympathetic? All of these things because they take us towards a greater degree of harmony with ourselves and with the universe, a greater degree of appreciation of this higher aspect, this joy within our own beings. There is no rule, then, more important in your life than the rule of joy, the instinctive search of your own being. Turn it rightly and you will understand that this can be actually made the highest guideline of moral, ethical, spiritual, political, every other kind of value. Learn to live more within yourself. Learn to seek happiness more within yourself. And you will find then that everything that you do will turn to harmony. Things are not going to give you happiness. Two people will find that they like and find happiness in very different things. You may like ice cream and I may not like ice cream. How then can we say that ice cream was the cause of our happiness? No. Actually, you do not find happiness. You merely uncover it by removing certain conditions that have been placed upon the mind by desire. A man goes down the street. He walks by a store window and he sees, let us say it's a beautiful sunny day and he feels wonderful and he's whistling and singing and rejoicing in the beauties of God's creation, when suddenly in a store window, what does he see? A jaguar. Oh, boy, that looks so beautiful. If only I had a jaguar. And suddenly his happiness is just a little bit less. And he decides that he's never really going to be happy again completely until he can get that jaguar. Well, he doesn't have the money. He has to get out and work for it. But his whole time is spent thinking of that jaguar, and this is his joy, the thought that when I get the jaguar, how happy I will feel. And finally, after 6 months or a year, he's got the money, and he comes in there and throws it down on the counter and takes his jaguar and drives around and rushes over to his friends' houses, and sure enough, this jaguar makes him the happiest person in the world. So he thinks. But about a week later, this happiness becomes a matter of affirmation. Well, I felt so good last week, so really I still am so happy to have this jaguar. But he has to keep reminding himself. He doesn't, it isn't as if every time he saw this jaguar he were soaring in the heavens. He has to keep saying, well, I've got a jaguar and therefore I'm happy, aren't I? Yes, isn't it wonderful? And about 2 weeks later, oh, it's a jaguar. So he's seen something else in the store window and he's gone after that. This is how we are with our search for happiness. We think that laughter lies in things. To those things, then, we become a slave. We think that if I have this and if I have that, then I will be happy. But all we really accomplish is as if you were pinching your skin. And you pinch, and you pinch, and you pinch, and boy, it begins to hurt, and it hurts more and more and more, and then finally you let go, and doesn't that feel good? But it doesn't really feel so good. You've just got rid of the thing that made it hurt in the first place. You have a searchlight shining upon bits of glass. Wherever that searchlight shines, the pieces of glass that it's shining upon will, for that period of time, take on what appears to be a radiance of their own, and all else is in darkness. The searchlight turns, and those pieces of glass that shone so beautifully suddenly become dark too. Similarly with this mind, all that you can enjoy in this world depends not upon the things of this world, but on your own capacity for enjoyment. A joyous person can find joy in everything. Some people used to say, fellow disciples of mine, used to say that our teacher used to love this, therefore isn't this wonderful? He liked to go to this place, or he liked to go to that place. And I always used to say, no, that isn't true. They aren't wonderful because he liked it. But he was wonderful that he could love so many things, that he could enjoy so many things. This is the mark of a great man, a spiritual man, that he can find cause for utter enjoyment in that which bores the average person.
a blade of grass, a cloud in the sky. Ramakrishna went into his first ecstasy, his first state of samadhi, just watching a flock of geese flying through the sky. If you can say, yes, I will enjoy this world, I will enjoy the beauties of this world, the beauties of friendship, the beauties of music, the beauties of beautiful poetry, but all of these things I will enjoy not for their own sake, but with the joy of God. How to do this? To meditate and to feel joy within yourself, and then let that joy radiate outward so that everything you understand to be but a reflection of what you are. Then you can expand this joy and you will find an interactive process between the two. And this is the path of the yogi. This is the path, the true path of spiritual development. To say, to discriminate, to understand that the source of my joy is within, and then to see reflections of that joy without. To meditate and feel joy inside, and then with a deliberate consciousness of this joy inside, enjoy all things with that joy. Feel love inside and love all people with that love. Appreciate all things with your own capacity for appreciation, but understand that all things are really a part of God. This is what the great Indian Upanishad says, where it says, to be completely engrossed in God, to have the thought, the understanding that there is no joy but that inner joy, and then with that joy to wish to live 100 years. To enjoy the world with that joy is simply to enjoy different aspects of God. But if you think to enjoy the things without God, then bit by bit the little lights within you become put out. The harmony that we think to create with our freeways and our money, all of this is in yourself. It is to be found by meditation. It is to be found by chanting God's name. It is to be found by living in harmony with yourself. It is to be found by finding calmness, peace, joy, not only within yourself, but as the very essence of your nature. You are joy. It is not merely that you attain joy. The joy cannot be attained. God cannot be attained because you are these things yourself already. All you can do is get down beneath the hubbub, the confusion, the turmoil of these restless thoughts and emotions, and find who and what you have always been. Joy. From joy we came, as Yoganandaji said. For joy we live, and in that sacred joy someday we must melt, for that is what we are. The meaning of happiness, then, is a very far-reaching, a very deeply important subject for our time, for all time. The more you have of this happiness, the more you have of this spiritual joy in your soul, the more you will find that you are able to harmonize the problems of your own life, of the lives of other people, and of the world. Not only with a smile, although you'd be surprised how much just a smile can do to solve difficulties in your life and in other people's lives, but even in the sense of giving you an understanding of practical things that you ought to do. Instead of spending your whole time fretting and thinking, what must I do to solve this problem, suddenly you'll find that there the understanding is. All things will come to you. All good things will come to you once you have this reality within yourself.
There's a great deal of misunderstanding of the meaning of the word humility. It's something that one learns more and more about as one goes along, as one advances on the path. And I don't suppose one can ever really understand it until he has found God and destroyed his own ego. Because our capacity for seeing things in a distorted way is practically infinite. The worst of talking about humility is that
we are talking about the very ego that is trying to get rid of itself. It's very difficult to speak about something clearly. We can use words that are clear in themselves. I'm not worried about that. But to reach that level of complete understanding in oneself is very difficult, because the very thing that we are trying to get rid of, the very instrument with which we're trying to get rid of it, the two are one. Essentially, the greatest mistake that people make when they think in terms of humility is that what they want to do is put themselves down. You're concentrating just as much on yourself if you're putting yourself down as if you're building yourself up. Humility is not inferiority complex. Humility is not saying you're no good when you can do something well enough. Humility is concentrating on yourself. Not concentrating on yourself. Ego is concentrating on yourself. It's more than that, because there isn't any question of humility when I'm looking at a tree and forgetting myself in watching those leaves there. Essentially, humility means when I have to do something, to be able to do it with the consciousness that God is doing it through me. To be aware that there is a great power flowing through me. And to say, oh no, I can't do that, I'm not able to express God, is not humility. That's a kind of ego. It's getting in the way of the divine flow. Who are you to say that you cannot express God? Or to put it in a better way, who are you to say that God can't express through you in spite of the obstacles? What we want to do is understand, I have often used this illustration, I think it's a very good one, of a violin string. What makes a violin tone beautiful is not the string. It's the sounding board underneath that string. If you had the string alone strung between two points, it would just have a very thin twang to it. You get that sounding board underneath it, it can thrill a whole audience, it can fill a concert hall. I don't think that humility can be just a question of putting ourselves aside and saying, you are the doer, although this is a very important aspect of it. Always to dwell on the thought that God is acting through you, but also, as I've mentioned in my book, The Path, I think the secret of humility is, to a great extent, simply to be honest. If you're really honest, there isn't anything that you can do, there isn't anything, so as not to let it be personal, that anyone can do that really is all that important. To look at a thing honestly is to see that, in fact, the human race itself is not particularly important in the scheme of things. It has been destroyed again and again, almost entirely, through great upheavals, cataclysms. Other species of life, like the ants, wander around not even knowing we exist, presumably, unless we step on them or put sugar out for them or something. Bake a cake that they can come in and snatch away. Nothing in this world, if we look at it in proportion, is all that important. This one little planet, how small it looks when you compare it to the universe. The nearest star, 4 light years away. This whole galaxy, composed of 100 billion stars, is only one of 100 billion galaxies. To look at life honestly makes it absolutely impossible to take anything very seriously, except from the standpoint of trying to put your whole attention to achieving enlightenment. We are important as children of God. We are infinitely important because we are a part of God. We are not important as men and women, as little bodies, as egos. Nothing that we do really matters. And if we have that view very firmly fixed in our minds, it should not make us think, therefore, I won't do anything. It should make us see in proper proportion the reason for which we do anything. And that reason is not to be able to accomplish very much in this world.
That reason is to accomplish our own salvation, and perhaps to be instrumental in helping other people to accomplish that salvation. Otherwise, whether you're sweeping corridors, or lecturing to multitudes, or ruling great empires, none of these things essentially is different from one from the other. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you are doing it for God. But on the other hand, to back away and say, oh, I don't want to do it, if this is what is being put upon you, if this is what you are being drawn to do, that can be just as great a delusion. I went through that for years. Master told me to lecture. I was very reluctant. I was perfectly willing to do things that didn't demand any great mental effort. But to be out there in front of people was something that it took me 7 years really to convince myself that it was worthwhile. But he all the time told me, you've got to learn to like it. That's what you have to do. He didn't ever say, well, if you don't like it, then fine, we'll give you something else. No, nothing like that. He didn't show any sympathy for me at all. One time I was sort of complaining. He said, all he said was, living for God is martyrdom. And I found over a period of time that when I went along with his will this way, that actually I felt more in tune with him, and when I resisted it, I felt less in tune with him and with God. So the important thing is that we do what we're supposed to do, but do it not with the thought that it's important in itself, because it's not. Whether I'm here talking or whether I'm incapable of talking doesn't matter. If I can serve God as some kind of instrument this way, that's important, but it doesn't mean that it's more important than serving him by working in the garden or picking leaves or anything. The important thing is that we become conscious of God's flow through us, and that's all that's important. We've all come into this world with certain gifts, and if we use those gifts, then we can be in tune with that flow of the universe, because God can work through us in those ways that we have developed ourselves. If through many incarnations you have developed certain abilities, and you say, oh no, I don't want to use them because I'm afraid of being egotistical, you're making a mistake. Because then you're having to, I get far more egotistical, not egotistical in a proud sense, far more conscious of my ineptitude and therefore conscious of myself, of my ego, when I'm doing things I'm bad at, because I'm all thumbs. I get out there and try to hammer nails in a board and miss the nail 9 times out of 10, and I begin to sort of get confused, and it's far more difficult for God to work through me, because I'm, when you've got a car that's got a squeak in it, all you think of is the squeak. And when you're not good at something, all you're conscious of is the squeak. This is a mistake that many people make, thinking that I don't want to do something I'm good at because I'm afraid of being egotistical, of getting my ego involved. The truth is that if you really are good at it, you can forget it. It comes naturally, and you can begin to feel the divine flow working through you. See somebody up there playing a violin and getting all the notes are flat, and he's getting confused, and he can't put himself into the music. He can't lose himself in the music. But if he's good, you can feel that he doesn't exist anymore. It's only the muse of music flowing through him. It's the divine instrument, divine inspiration flowing through him. And this is how we have to do it. Secondly, don't think that God's going to do it for you. There has to be a consciousness of doing it. We can't get away from ego. What we want to do is transmute ego into a higher octave. If you just sit back and say, well, God, if you want it done, you'll do it through me, you'll find that it doesn't work. We have to act. Master said, I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right course in every action. Master himself, remember in his poem, Samadhi, he wrote, I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. He couldn't have lived in a body if there weren't an ego there.
But it was an ego that was conscious of its unity with the divine. He was conscious that the divine was using that little consciousness of his body. But if that consciousness were taken away, then the body would cease to function altogether. Ego is soul identified with the body. Ego is that little definition of the divine that says, oh, I have this little body to take care of, this little personality known as Kriyananda. That's all it is. It's when we build it up and start to say, oh, I kind of like this body. Well, that's a pretty nice ego. Oh, how about that? That's when we start getting confused and egotism gets into the picture. Pride. The divisions of consciousness that make us identified, that bring the soul, the infinite spirit, into outward manifestation and then bondage, Master divided, well, the Indian scriptures have divided, and Master explained in this way. The names of them are Mon, mind, Buddhi, intellect, Ahankar, ego, Chitta, feeling. He said, imagine a mirror and a horse reflected in the mirror. The reflection of the horse has no particular meaning. This is the mind, looking at things through the senses, seeing the world and reflecting them. And you reflect without any definition at all that you perceive through your senses. Then the ego comes in and looks at that reflection and says, oh, that's a horse. The discriminating faculty, the intellect. The intellect comes in. Is that what I said ego? I meant intellect. Intellect comes in and says, that's a horse. Then the ego steps into the picture and says, oh, that's my horse. Even at that point, you're not bound. I mean, if you have a horse, you've got to take care of it. If you have a body, you've got to clothe it, you've got to bathe it, you've got to trim your fingernails and cut your hair and so on. That doesn't involve ego. You don't have to feel guilty for doing that. You can't renounce the body and renounce ego simply by letting it decay. You have to take care of it. So you're not yet bound as long as there's just that thought of personal identification. This, out of all horses, is one I have to take care of. That's no problem. It's when you step one notch down and say, oh, I'm happy to see my horse. That's when you get bound. Likes and dislikes. I like this. I hate that. I love you. I don't like you. This is how we chop the world up into all these different experiences, and how we get on one side and in our opposition to the other side, in our bondage to this side, we become stuck in delusion. So when you are doing a thing, understand, I have to do it. But if you start thinking, gee, I wonder how good it is, what I'm doing. Do people like it? Don't they like it? I wonder why they don't like it. Hey, it's pretty good. Nobody else can do it as well as I can. Or, gee, I'm no good. Everybody's better than I am. It's all ego, whether you're inferiority or superiority complex. It's all ego. You've got to learn to forget yourself and let that divine inspiration flow through you. There are two ways of doing this. One is to expand your outward consciousness, and the other is to deepen your inward consciousness. Expanding your outward consciousness means to begin to identify yourself with others more. We need to expand our consciousness and start being more interested in other people, more interested in our work. Be interested in this world outwardly in an expanded way. And you'll see that really that's far more interesting. You concentrate on yourself all the time, and it gets a little boring. But there are so many other people in life, so many other wonderful things to get interested in, and expand your consciousness in this way, and you'll find, lose yourself in your work, lose yourself in people, and you'll find that you don't really take yourself that seriously. You see yourself in proportion to the whole world. If you take a little straw and hold it up to your eyes, it looks huge. I remember when I was riding in a bus years ago in San Francisco, and out of the corner of my eye I saw this great, huge object
across the wall of a building. I thought, my goodness, what big object would be running down the wall of a building? And I looked, and it was a little fly on the window of the bus right next to my head. It looked big only because it was close. We look big to ourselves only if we hold ourselves up too close. Put yourself at a greater distance. And you can do that if you can get a sense of proportion by seeing yourself objectively, seeing yourself in relation to all these other people. And don't take yourself too seriously in the general run of things. You know, a friend of mine in college, Rod Brown, he used to have a great inferiority complex. He used to think that people were always putting him down and criticizing him mentally and talking about him when he wasn't around and so on. And his mother one time said to him, you know, Rod, you're just not that important to people. I thought that was a beautiful way to put it. It's amazing how an inferiority complex is really just too much self-importance. You don't matter that much to people that they should waste their time judging you. They've got too many, they're too worried about themselves. They're worried about how you're judging them. The best thing is to forget yourself and just feel that you are a part of this whole show. Objectively, look at yourself as Master when he said, I, the cosmic sea, watch the little ego floating in me. But much more important than that is to meditate and feel the presence of God and feel Him working through you. Feel His inspirations through you. Feel Him. Don't say, because God has inspired me to say this, therefore you must listen to me. Don't talk like that. Don't think like that. Always be humble before God, because even masters can make mistakes. As long as they're living in a physical body, there's the possibility of error. Don't presume on God's grace or on His guidance, but be very sort of respectful of that guidance and say, I think that this is what you were telling me to do. If I'm making a mistake, please show me that I'm wrong. But until I understand differently, I will act with that consciousness that this is what you wish me to do. But always be like a humble disciple at the feet of infinity. I would much rather be a good disciple than a good teacher. Always sit at the feet of the Guru, always sit at the feet of God, and say, you act through me. I will reason, I will, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right thing in everything. And when we have that consciousness, we are justified in feeling what could come across as a certain pride. It isn't pride in oneself, but joy in the rightness and the goodness of what we are doing. It's insincere if you have done a good job to say, well, I don't think it's really very good. That's hypocrisy. If it isn't good, you should do it over and over until you think it is good. It isn't right to say it isn't good. It's right to say it doesn't matter anyway. That's different. But to take full joy in what you're doing, to become confident in His power, to flow through you and to do great things through you, this is humility too. It's a kind of humility that worldly people may not understand. But it's an understanding of God's power to accomplish anything that He wants to do. Don't ever say, I can't do it. Say, well, He can do it. Dwell on the thought of His power, and you will find that far from becoming a little thing, a little being in this world, you can accomplish great things. Great in the eyes of God, maybe not great in the eyes of man, because some of the greatest things that have ever been done in this world, no one ever heard about. But they expressed God, and God was pleased. It's His pleasure that we should court, and no one else's. What people think of what we do may and may not reflect His pleasure, God's pleasure. Many times when people like it is the first sign you get that it's probably got something wrong with it. I would like to look to the feeling of joy in my heart. When I have expressed that inspiration in the right way, I feel joy. If I have expressed it somehow in the wrong way, many times I've done things
that other people thought were very good, but I feel unhappy inside because I feel he's not pleased. He's not satisfied yet. Sometimes I feel a certain nervousness, as if, no, there's been a mistaken attunement there, and then I try to correct that. Watch for those two signs inside yourself. If there is a joy welling up inside you, a divine joy, you can know that you've done it right. When we do a right thing, right in the eyes of God, right in the eyes of our conscience, right in the eyes of this inspiration that we feel from Him, then we feel as if the whole universe was flowing with us, and things work better then too. And if we don't have that full attunement inwardly, so that what we're saying is only partly right, then it doesn't feel completely right. If it's wrong, it can look good to others. But if it's wrong, we feel very wrong inside, and we know that this is not a good thing. Let that be your court of judgment, not men, not human opinions. It's good to get human opinions, lest you get into a delusion. It's very easy. This mind is a labyrinth. And if you refuse, or if you feel you're so good that you don't want anybody else's opinions on things, then you're very close to becoming a cropper. That's delusion. But to be willing to listen to God in others, to be willing to hear their opinion and to think, well, is it God talking to me, or is it their own opinion? God can talk to you through stones. He can talk to you through people, through children, through bees, through birds. Listen. Be always receptive. This is humility. To listen to the divine inspiration and to let it flow through you and to try to attune yourself with that inspiration. That's humility. And then don't say, I can't do it. God can do anything He wants to through you if you give Him the chance. Make your criterion your attunement with Him.
Our subject this morning is the middle path. In the early times of India, back in the days of Buddha, we read the story about how for some years Buddha lived in seclusion, secluded from the world, but with a community of hermits whose practice was a very extreme form of penance. Some of them would hold their hands up above their heads for long periods of time. Others would fast to the point where their bodies became emaciated, and others would sleep hardly at all in order to punish the body and keep the body and the senses completely under the control of their will. And Buddha, for some time, followed this practice, but finally came to the discovery, the realization, that there really was nothing that he seemed to be gaining out of this extreme form of penance. And in later years he taught the importance of following the middle path, the path of taking care of your body, keeping up the needs of your human nature at the same time as seeking God. In the Bhagavad Gita, we see also the teaching stressed again and again that man should do his duty in this world. Sri Krishna says that religion is not for him who eats too much or who eats too little, for him who sleeps too much or sleeps too little, but that it is for him who is measured in his eating, in his sleeping, in his actions, in his meditating. Sri Krishna then again says here the same teaching, that we must balance our lives, that we must harmonize ourselves inwardly and outwardly if we are to find the right path to spiritual enlightenment. In this age, again, we have found great teachers that have been stressing this same teaching. Sri Aurobindo, Paramhansa Yogananda, and others have pointed out the need for man to fulfill his duties, to do his work, to take care of himself and develop himself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, lest by developing only one side of one's nature and starving the other side, one find that there come in his spiritual progress certain subtle obstacles that hold him back. You can stretch the body just so far, but then you may come to the point where you will see that, like a rubber band, the tension becomes greater and greater the more you stretch it. Finally, there comes a point where you can stretch it no longer and it pulls back upon itself. Some years ago, I was spending my time in the desert, meditating, and I was skipping my evening meals and in order to be able to have more time for meditation. And my guru one time came to find out about it, and he said, you should have something at least in the evening. He said, the difficulty with a vegetarian diet is that people often do not get enough balanced food, and you should eat more. And I said, but sir, it interferes with my meditation, and meditation is the main thing, isn't it? He said that you will find, if you do not follow my advice, that after some years your body will begin to become unwell and lacking energy, and you will find that then your meditations will begin to suffer in consequence. And I have a letter in which he wrote to me, he gave me a schedule that I ought to follow every day. He said, keep exercised and body fit for God realization. The middle path. This middle path is a very important thing to stress at all times, and you will find that most great teachers have come to help people to come back to this middle path. The greatest teachers, even those who followed an extreme way themselves, after finding the goal, they said that then they realized that the best way was a balanced middle path. Now let us go deeper into an understanding of what this middle path is, what it really involves, because to many people, a middle path refers not to what these teachings were discussing or at all, but rather to rather it simply becomes an excuse for continuing just the way they are right now. Well, this is not what the teachers taught. And if we are to understand what their real teaching is, because they were stressing constantly the need not to go to extremes in meditation and penance, in fasting and so on. And Jesus, we see the same thing. He and his disciples used to feast and have a more or less normal life, and people were criticizing him because they didn't fast and so on. But the thing is that people do not understand that those same masters were not saying that therefore the answer is to just live the way everybody else does. There is much more to it than that. In fact, the whole purpose of the spiritual path is to help a man to transcend human consciousness and to realize his unity with the divine, to realize his unity with God. Now, to understand it aright then, what we must do is understand, well, the difference essentially between the oneness of God and the duality of worldly living. Dualism and non-dualism. Now, according to the teaching of India, when the Spirit decided to bring this creation into manifestation, he could not do so by the normal means that we would conceive of, going out and buying something and building something out of that. There was nothing to build out of except himself. He was all that there was. He manifested this universe out of his own consciousness. Now, how did he accomplish this? Spirit was one. How could that one take on an appearance of many? By assuming this law of duality. The one had to take on the law of polarity, of opposites, and thus we see expressed in all of creation this basic principle of opposites, of polarity, of Dvaita. Now then, if we are to find the middle path, essentially what this whole concept implies is that what we are trying to do is find that middle between all opposites, because that is the point where God realization can take place. Lahiri Mahashaya said that the whole idea of realizing God is catching those rest points when the waves of the mind and the waves of consciousness are stilled for a while, become motionless, so that then in that stillness the mind becomes like a mirror. It can reflect the higher realities. the mind is often said in yoga teachings to be like a lake with ripples on it that cannot reflect purely and clearly the image of the moon above. But once that lake becomes still, then the image becomes clearly visible in the water. And then you can lift your eyes up and see, oh, there the moon is. I was only looking at the reflection. But so long as the mind is dim, its understanding is dim with restlessness, then you will find that all perceptions will be fragmentary, and you will not be able to understand where God is, where these higher realities are, how they may be attained. These rest points. This was actually the whole definition of yoga. Yoga means union. Union with God, union with the higher self, union with a union of your whole nature, self-realization in a word. Yoga was defined by Patanjali as yoga chitta vritti nirod. Yoga is the neutralization of the waves of consciousness and feeling. And that is all that it is. When the consciousness within you can reach the point where it no longer goes in all these opposite directions, up and down, out and in, but can find that calm middle ground, then realization occurs as a matter of course. It occurs automatically because God has not to be fashioned. God did not fashion this universe, nor can we fashion God. We cannot create our unity with Him. This is the sole reality underlying all things. Then, in order to establish that unity, we can realize it only. Realize that which is ours already. Realize that which we already have. Self-realization is the knowing in all parts of body, mind, and soul that you are now in possession of the kingdom of God, that you do not need to pray that it come to you, that God's omnipresence is your omnipresence, and all that you need to do is improve your knowing. To understand this, then, is a very essential point of the whole spiritual path. To know that the middle path carries through to the very highest level because it is based on this final philosophy of realizing yourself always at the middle between all opposites. How are you then to do this? Well, the yogis teach first of all, the practice of titiksha. T-I-T-I-K-S-H-A. Titiksha. Endurance. Always, no matter what you do, it isn't a question of what you do outwardly. This is a very important point on the path. Whether you become an artist or don't become an artist, whether you become a businessman or don't become a businessman, whether you do anything or don't do anything, the important thing is where your consciousness is and what is happening to your consciousness. If it will help to unfold you because of your nature to be an artist, be an artist. If it will not, don't be an artist. Develop that which you are, but always with the consciousness of coming to this point of the middle ground. What then are you to do with this question of titiksha? Always, no matter what you do, discriminate between the inner man and the outer man. Do not, for example, if you are an artist, say, I am an artist, but say that I am painting. Don't identify yourself with your actions, but act in order to achieve freedom, not bondage. This should be the guiding principle of action. Again, in the question of endurance, which comes more specifically to matters of self-control and so on, the extreme path would be to say that I must overcome the feeling of heat and cold, and therefore I will go around without clothes, and I will submit myself to great physical torment and heat, and so on. Well, if you can do it, it's all right, but the average person is likely not to be able to do it, or in the doing is likely to become so engrossed in this one thing that he forgets everything else. To give you an example that will be closer to home, I've mentioned that I'm a vegetarian. There are many vegetarians in this country. I have met many of them, and I must admit that many of them are really extremists. But it's not extremism to be a vegetarian. What is extremism is to make vegetarianism your religion, and to think that it is all important when obviously it is not all important. It doesn't matter nearly so much as changing your consciousness. It doesn't matter nearly so much as overcoming anger and greed and jealousy and so on. then what is necessary? The necessary thing is to act, but inwardly disassociate yourself from your actions. If it's cold, and you are able, without caring, able to go about without an overcoat on, so much the better. It'll give you mental strength, and this is what you want. That mental strength to resist outward influences and to remain centered within yourself. But if you cannot, then do not go to extremes. The extreme would be to make such an issue of it that either this, because if it's something too difficult for you, it will become an all-absorbing interest. On the other hand, if not that, to find that by trying to practice it, you merely succumb to cold. But at the same time, mentally understand that the real way is to say, well, if it's cold, if my body requires an overcoat, I'll put it on, but I won't say that I require an overcoat. Again, with this principle of fatigue, if your body feels tired, don't say, I am tired. Say my body, excuse me, say that my body needs rest, but don't say I need rest. I don't need rest. I am not this body. Everything that you do, try mentally to keep a little bit of aloofness from it so that you do not go all out all out in any direction. There are many people who believe that the way to enjoy this world is to just give yourself wholly to it. When things go well, just get all excited about it. Shout, sing, dance, tell the world. But the same people who follow this principle are the ones who fall into great deeps of moods, depressions. The up and down principle of enjoyment is a false one. But if when things go, well, let's put it the other way around because it's easier to accept. When things go badly, instead of succumbing to them, always in your mind say, well, all right, so they're bad today, they'll be better tomorrow. Don't become too involved in what is good and what is bad. Don't be too associated with your present life, however long it may be, because it won't last very long. Again, when good moods come, when good things come, say, well, all right, it's good today, but maybe tomorrow it won't be so good. So do not give yourself wholly to it. That's not a negative thought. It's telling yourself that I am not going to make my happiness depend upon whether things go well or go badly. So they're going well today, I can enjoy them, but I'll enjoy them with freedom so that when they go, if they go, I'll still be free and I'll still enjoy. This is freedom, and this is the middle path. Never to commit yourself too far in any direction, but always to try to hold yourself in that calm center within. Live in the self. With this consciousness, then, do your duty. Do not think that anything external is going to be necessarily bad or necessarily good, but rather, as a matter of fact, to live in this world and do one's duty in this world is the highest path, provided one can live that way, still following this middle path of calm inner detachment and balance. This is the way of the world, this is the law of the world, and to follow the law completely is to put yourself more in harmony with the principle from which this law proceeds. But the trouble is that most people trying to follow that law become enmeshed and lose their consciousness of the middle path. That is why in ages past so many of the saints used to tell people if they wanted to find God, they had to give up the world, they had to go away to the mountains, they had to spend their time in seclusion and in meditation. Not that this is the highest path, but only that such was the age and such was the darkness of people's minds that if they did not follow that, they would get drawn too wholly into worldly consciousness and would not be able to find God at all. But at least in silence, in seclusion, they could find themselves within themselves. But this is not the highest path. The highest path is to live in the world, to follow the laws of this world, to be a man among men, and yet in yourself to always remain at rest. The middle path is the path of quiet, of calm, where the mind and the heart become still in the consciousness of that one God within. Enjoy beautiful scenery, enjoy beautiful things, but enjoy them not for the things themselves, but with the joy of God. If you love to paint, paint. Fulfill this in your nature, but at the same time try to feel that it is God who is using you in order to become an artist. All things are spiritual, for with the help of the outer, man attains to the inner. This is what the Taittiriya Upanishad says. All things can be spiritual, and this is the great fallacy that we have found introduced again and again into religion. The thought that some works are spiritual and other works are not spiritual. That work is spiritual for you, which helps you to find this middle path of oneness within yourself. All work is spiritual if you take it in the right spirit, if it helps to develop that within you which will bring you to this state of rest within yourself. If you have a desire, that is something that is extending you from this state of rest within yourself. A desire takes you out of that middle path. Anything that you long for, anything that you are attached to, anything that you are identified with becomes something that takes you away from yourself, takes you away then from this middle path of the point of rest between two opposites. Now then, how are you to get out of this? Well, unless the desire is of such a nature as to take you away from your spiritual endeavors, and those desires you must simply starve yourself out. You must give them up, because by giving in to them it will only involve a tremendous detour. But the littler things the things that you can do and use as a means to bring you back to this state of spiritual consciousness, do them, and do them with the thought of God. Do them with the feeling that you are fulfilling a part of God's plan in this universe. Feel that you are serving Him, even if you are making money in business, if you are a secretary typing letters, if you are a musician in a symphony orchestra, if you are a housewife washing dishes and cooking. All of these things can be good. All of these things can be beautiful, if one understands the truth behind them, that they are a part of the divine. There was a woman who came to a great master in India. His name was Sri Ramakrishna. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have heard of him. And she said, "Master, I don't find it possible to meditate the way you say, because my time is necessarily devoted to my little baby. If I close my eyes for 2 minutes, he's getting into some mischief." So he said, "That's all right, you don't have to. But look upon that baby as Bala Krishna. Look upon that baby as the little baby Krishna. And when you are serving the baby food, feel that you are feeding Krishna. And when you are putting the baby to bed, feel that you are putting Krishna to bed. And when you're spanking the baby, feel that you're spanking Krishna. There's no harm in that. But all of it, make it Krishna." And you know, this woman attained a very high state of spiritual realization through this consciousness. There is nothing greater about being in a monastery or not being in a monastery. The greatness is making the best of what you have right now. Become true to yourself. Find your own self within and practice those meditative techniques, methods that will help you to realize this state of rest no matter where you are. And then, wherever you go, the deeper part of this teaching is to feel always that you are centered, either here in the heart, or here at the point between the eyebrows, or in the spine. In the center of your being, feel that everything that you do is but a radiation outward from that center, that nothing is there tearing you away from it, but always you are remaining in the self and acting in all directions, centered in that self. This is the consciousness then that is intended, that is implied in this whole teaching of the middle path. It's the consciousness that all of us need to develop in our spiritual efforts, in our meditation, in our work, in everything. Do your duty, but do it for God, not for matter, not for money, not for mammon. Meditate, but do it for God and not just for the sake of personal powers. Do everything with joy, knowing that He is with you at all times, that He can never leave you because He is you. This is the fastest way to God realization.
One of the problems that people face in life is an inability to put all their energy into any direction, any one direction at a time. Their energies are
not only scattered in the sense that they want to do several things, but more than that, they're paralyzed or negated, contradicted, by the fact that even while they want to do something, another part of their mind says, I don't want to do it. The strength that they have to move forward is offset by their wish to not involve themselves, their fear that maybe they'll fail if they try, that maybe the results either won't be forthcoming, or that if they are forthcoming, will they really be what they want, and so on. In all life, there is this, you might call it an upward and a downward energy. This all sort of ties in with the teaching which has been often noted by, the truth, I should say, that's often been noted by psychologists and different writers in the West without any reference to the science of yoga, and that is that in all of us there is a life wish and also a death wish. This death wish, the French called it la nostalgie de la boue, the nostalgia for the mud. It's really a good expression in the sense that all of us have this thought. Well, we could put it this way. Here we are on the battlefield of life, knowing that we want to resolve the battle by achieving peace. And there are two ways that we can see of achieving this peace, this surcease of struggle. One is to win a victory, and the other is to give up. The one is to put out a great deal of energy to combat, to struggle, and the other is either to give up by letting them kill you, by feigning dead, by surrendering, by running away, whatever it might be. There is in every struggle in life this thought that, well, if I don't try, maybe it'll work out and I'll get the same results, in the sense that there won't be any more of this pain involved of having to struggle, having to fight it out. So I think probably this is the source of that life wish and death wish. The one is to have a state of consciousness, such a dynamic life within us that we can transcend every trouble, transcend every test, transcend every difficulty in life. And the other is the thought that, well, if we're not around, then we won't have those difficulties. If we die, that's only a part of the death wish, the literal wish for death. The wish to go to sleep and sleep it off is another obvious corollary. But the wish to fade out, the wish to not take it on, the wish to be a non-entity, for example, rather than go through the struggle that it takes to achieve success. The wish not to put out the effort to become not merely successful in one's work, but successful in anything that one does, in the sense of our human relations. So many people think that oh, it's just too much trouble to make friends. It's too much trouble to go after that person, even though you think that he'd make a good wife, or she'd make a good wife, or he'd make a good husband, or whatever. But it's too much trouble. It's too much trouble. This is the thought in so many people's minds. They think that if they just sort of close their eyes, it'll all go away. Well, of course, life is not like that. Life goes on, and we have to face it. In fact, those who have any knowledge of spiritual teachings know that we have to face it in the other world just as much as here, and those who know anything about the teachings that a large majority of the human race embraces know that they will have to work it out right here in this world too. It's sort of like a friend of mine who was in a monastery and decided that it was just too much to face all the troubles of trying to change himself and so on, and ran away. But the main thing that he ran away from was a person in the monastery who he couldn't stand. Well, he told me ruefully about it a couple of years later. You know how I used to hate so-and-so? He said, in the place where I work there are 6 others exactly like him. The truth is that if we run away from anything, it gains a certain power over us. It becomes stronger. It may not always literally be that you'll get 6 others exactly like that man, but you will find yourself weaker in relation to whatever test it is,
whatever difficulty it is. You can't close your eyes and hope it'll blow away. It won't. But if you will summon up the strength and the courage to say, yes, I can do it. If you will summon up the courage to want, with full enthusiasm, to dive in and try your best, you will be surprised to see that not only are you gaining courage, but you're also gaining strength. That very obstacle or opponent who seems to be getting bigger when you run away seems to get smaller when you run toward. That when you face something and march toward it and say, I will, then you'll find that it will gradually diminish, and it will suddenly become not merely a conquered foe, but here's a very interesting fact. It will give you energy. It will become transformed from an angel of darkness to an angel of light. The very energy that you were using to say no will suddenly be an energy that will give you a greater power to say yes. This is really the hidden meaning in a little understood aspect of that great Indian scripture, the Bhagavad Gita, which is placed on a battlefield. And Arjuna is saying that, well, he goes with the charioteer, who is actually Krishna, who represents God in his own soul. He's saying, I can't face the idea of killing my own relatives. And Krishna says, well, but there is no such thing as death. You won't be killing them. They'll only go on to another existence. What Krishna's saying in a deeper sense here is that the human being says, oh, I can't kill my relatives, means my bad qualities, which are still a part of my own self. I can't kill them. I don't want to give up that no-saying principle. And Krishna says, but you don't actually kill anything. That means you don't give up you don't kill those qualities. The energy you were putting into them, if you can overcome it, you can redirect and use in a constructive way that gives your positive energy twice as much force. Point here that I've just touched on, but it can go into many different ramifications, is this idea of the importance of having a concentration of power in order to overcome anything, to overcome delusion, to fight negative influences and so on. In our lives, in whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish, it's not just a question of fighting against, it's also a question of fighting for. Many times we tend not to realize how very necessary it is to do what we set out to do with power. Many people are good, but because they don't really put their power into what they're doing, they don't get very far. A marvelous example to the contrary is Valmiki, who, by his own account, and therefore we can probably take it with a certain grain of salt, was the greatest sinner in the whole world. But he must not have been all that good. He was a highway robber who killed people, and he came to these. He came upon some saints one day and was all set to kill them, and they asked him why he was doing this, and he said, "Well, I'm doing it because I have to support my family, and everybody has to have a job. This is my job." They said, "Well, you're getting bad karma for it. Do you suppose your family is willing to share your bad karma as well as your ill-gotten gains?" And he said, "Well, of course they are. I'm doing it out of love for them." So they said, "Well, why don't you go home and find out? Ask them if they'd be willing. And if they would be, then come back and you can take our lives. And if not, what will you do about it?" And he said, "Well, certainly if they aren't willing to take my bad karma, then I don't see why I should keep on supporting them in this way." The saints said, "Well, would you leave them and seek the truth?" And he said, "Certainly." So he went back and he asked them how they felt about it, and they said, "Well, the way you support us is your business. That's not our business. We can't take your bad karma."
we're perfectly willing that you support us. This is your duty. But how you do it is your business. So, no, we cannot accept such a thing as that. So Valmiki realized that they were merely using him as a meal ticket. And he renounced them, and he went back to the saints, and he asked them to initiate him. Well, I think you all know the story. They tried to initiate him into the mantra of Rama, and he was so evil that he couldn't say such a spiritual mantra as Rama. So they said, well, in that case, pronounce the mantra as Mara, which means Satan and death. And he found that very easy to say. So he was saying Rama, 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 which became Rama, 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 the mantra that they wanted him to say. Well, he went at this thing with such hammer and tongs that in not very long a time he was going into samadhi. In fact, he went so deep into samadhi that he just was out of his body for a long time, and an anthill gradually grew up around him. When he came out of that samadhi, he found himself inside the anthill. But the point is that even, it says in the Gita, even the worst of sinners, if he steadfastly meditates, quickly comes to me. And it isn't where we are, it isn't what we have to overcome, it's how much energy we put into the process. If we really apply energy to everything that we're doing, then we can accomplish. But most people sort of wish for good things, wish to do good things, wish to help others, wish to help themselves, but not with enough power. And that's why they don't get anywhere on the path. One of the things that help us to develop this kind of power is to mix with those people who are in tune with that kind of magnetism that we want to develop. If you want to become an artist, mix with artists, Master said. If you want to be a businessman, mix with successful businessmen, don't mix with failures. If you want to become a devotee, mix with other devotees. Master said one time to Bernard, the thing that determines whether your devotion, whether your heart's feeling will go in the direction of devotion or of emotion, will be really the company that you keep. If you mix with devotees, it'll go towards devotion. If you mix with emotional people, it'll go towards emotion. Bernard, when Master said this, asked him, well then, in that case, sir, what if I'm alone? How will I ever be able to develop devotion if I'm by myself, if it requires the company of devotees to develop it? Then Master smiled very sweetly and he said, am I not always with you? So keeping the consciousness of Master and of God in our hearts is the most important kind of satsanga of all. You can live alone. If you have that, then you will be able to advance the best of all. As Sri Yukteswar said, the most important thing in keeping good company is the consciousness with which you keep it. Some people can live in ashrams with great saints, and you find them years and years later, and they're still angry and selfish and jealous and have all the human faults. Because being there is not enough. The consciousness with which you are there is the most important thing. And the consciousness that we have, we can keep the company of saints just by thinking about them all the time, even if we are living in the world, but it is more difficult. When living or mixing with devotees, however, always try to mix with respect. Worldly people are always sort of meeting each other on the lowest common level. When they get together, they're sort of swapping dirty jokes and talking in ways that are disrespectful of one another, thinking that this is good comradeship. Come on, Joe, let's have a drink, and sort of all very, very backslapping and low, and not. They think that and try to be as much as possible with devotees. Within the community, try to mix with those who remind you the most of God. Stay away from those who want to pull you down, because in any community there are people also who are negative, people also who won't meditate as much as others, people who like to sit around and gossip and think that they're They are being spiritual because they're gossiping about God. But that's not enough. I know Dayamata in the beginning, she was going in with others of the women there at Mount Washington when they were sort of having spiritual bull sessions. And it seemed like a good thing. They were talking of spiritual things. They were talking about God and saints and so on. But it was just gossip compared to meditating and making a real effort. The master, who saw that her potential was far greater than theirs, opened the door one time and looked at her and he said, "What are you doing here? Get up to your room, meditate." And from then on she spent more time alone with God. But this is how we should live our lives. Mixing with those who are positive, mixing with those who are spending their time thinking about God and meditating more. And don't spend your time too much with people anyway. Spend time more with God. Try to focus your power. Try to focus your spiritual energy. Concentrate your devotion, and that way you'll advance more quickly. Another aspect of it is that if you were to well, this has happened with armies that were weak. As an example, Tolstoy in his novel War and Peace talks about the Russian army, which was no match for Napoleon. And so, instead of engaging Napoleon head-on and facing the certainty of defeat, they would sort of hide out in the forests and make raiding attacks on bits of his army at a time. When they were least expected, they would come and demolish small segments. And in this way, they were able gradually to get Napoleon on the run. Of course, the weather and so on were all a part of that picture. Now, the point here is that you cannot fight all your battles at once. There's no point in becoming discouraged if you find that there is some fault that is just too big for you. There will be probably many faults that are too big for you, some you may not even see. Don't worry about it. Don't try to scatter your forces and take on all your inner enemies at once. You won't be able to win that way. But take on those that you think you can beat. Knock them out of commission, and you'll find you have more energy on your side and a little bit less energy on that side. And bit by bit, fight those few battles that you feel yourself strong to do until you find that you are developing the strength to take on the bigger enemies, the bigger delusions. So, remember, always fight with concentration. Don't scatter your energies over all sorts of, all fronts at once. Don't try to accomplish all good things at once. Try to accomplish one thing well, instead of huffing and puffing and dashing through all the virtues at once, trying to do all the techniques well at once. Do just a few things and do them deeply. The Master spoke of chanting, for example. He said, take one chant and repeat it day after day, all day long, until you finally achieve a divine response. Then you will have spiritualized that chant, and any time you chant it, it will give you that inspiration. So, with anything that you do, try to do a few things and do them well, instead of thinking, well, but how can I ever do all the things Master said, and then trying to do them all. He said, if you do even 1/100th part of what I have said, you will get there. So don't worry about all the things you haven't done, all the things you haven't faced yet, all the virtues you haven't accomplished yet, all the techniques you haven't perfected yet. Don't worry about that. But just fight your battles one by one, day after day, and you'll be able to get there. Master told about this vision that he'd had once as a young man, where he was standing in a hot and dusty marketplace, and he saw people walking about their business and daily affairs, their brows lined with worry and care, and none of them happy. And every now and then one of them would stand and look at a place somewhere up above behind Master, and an inexpressible wistfulness would come over his face, and then he would shake his head and he'd say, oh, it's too high for me, and he'd go on about his worrisome daily affairs, daily activities again. After this had happened 2 or 3 times, Master turned around to see what it was they were looking at. And he saw that behind him there was this high mountain. And beyond the outskirts of the town, all was green and beautiful. But at the top of the mountain there was this almost paradise. It was so beautiful. And the first thought to him too came, oh, that's where I want to go. I don't want to live in this hot, dusty, dirty town anymore. I would like to live up there in the midst of all that beauty. And then the thought came to him, oh, but the mountain's too high to climb. It's steep, it's difficult. And then suddenly this divine fire of determination awoke in his heart, and he said, well, it may be so, but at least I can put one foot in front of the other. And so doing, gradually he walked and came up to the top. So it is that in our lives, we don't have to worry about what an enormous job we've got to undertake, as long as we understand that by concentrating our forces on one battle at a time, even little battles, each step is a step in the right direction if we're taking it towards this freedom in ourselves, this freedom in God. And each time you win a battle, here is the beauty of it, in a worldly battle, you kill the enemy and he's dead. But the Bhagavad Gita makes it clear that in this spiritual battle, there is no death. In this spiritual battle, actually what you do is you take the energy away from that which you fought, and it gives you more energy to fight. So each time you overcome an enemy, each time you develop a friend, you develop more power, and that power ultimately will come to you to be able to just cut through all the shreds of delusions, which seem so strong but are really shadows. They have no power except as we have given them power. The time will come then when we can cut through all of them at once and be free in the infinite. It's a wonderful future to look forward to. But this principle of concentrating your forces is basic to the whole spiritual path.